All right, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders this offseason have a number of big time goals. They obviously moved off GM Tom Telesco, fired Antonio Pierce. A lot of questions, a lot of big moves coming down the pipe for the Raiders. Everyone's focusing on who the Raiders are going to hire to be their next head coach, but it looks like they're preparing to make a phenomenal hire for the general manager position as well. Exciting news out of Las Vegas. But first, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, this is a Raiders team at this point. We all know they're focused reportedly all in on the Ben Johnson sweepstakes, thinking he could revitalize this franchise from a coaching perspective. But they also need to address the general manager position in the franchise. And it looks like there's one guy who may be emerging as the favorite who would be a phenomenal hire. Let's pull up this report courtesy of SI.com. Earlier this week, the Raiders, interviewed AFC West division rival, the Los Angeles Chargers assistant general manager, Chad Alexander. Alexander's first interview must have gone well because the Silver and Black will bring Alexander back for a second interview. According to NFL National Insider Ian Rappaport, Alexander will interview on Monday. Chargers assistant GM Chad Alexander will be flying to Vegas for a second in-person interview on Monday, source said Rappaport on X/Twitter. Alexander learned under the legend Ozzie Newsome and was GM Joe Ortiz's first hire. I think that last sentence says it all for the Raiders, why it would be such a good hire for them to bring him as the GM. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this, but Raider Nation first in the comment section below. Who do you want the Raiders to hire as their next general manager, right? Is it a guy like Alexander? Maybe it's somebody else. Obviously, a lot of attention on the head coach, but GM, obviously, very important as well. Let us know who you want the Raiders to hire to be the next general manager. Put them in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on this latest news out of Las Vegas?
Yeah, Nick, I think this is just showing that Vegas really, whoever's pulling the strings, if it's Brady, if it's Davis, whoever has gotten in control of this franchise, seems to be making a lot of very calculated and very smart moves, in my opinion. This latest search for the GM, I think, looked really great. And the fact that they're bringing in a former Ozzie Newsome acolyte and Alexander, I think that is a great place to start. Being from that GM tree, everyone's been successful. Ozzie Newsome obviously was great in his day, one of the best GMs, I would say, of all time, and a great player to boot. Comes in immediately succeeded by Eric DaCosta, who's done a really great job for Baltimore as well. And that Ortiz leaves from under DaCosta to come over to the Chargers in year one with the Chargers. I'd say he's done a great job as well. So coming in and saying, hey, this was the first guy for them to pick. This was the guy that they wanted to bring into the organization first, right after Ortiz and Alexander. I think that's a really great selection for the Raiders to go after because he's been a part of something very special on two separate teams. I think whoever's pulling the strings over in Las Vegas has their beat on who the real move makers in the front office, general manager section of things is, as well as the coaches, because the coaching hires and the coaching interviews, how they've run that whole ordeal has been really good, I think, as well. So I think the Raiders are heading in the right direction. This is all speculation. We don't know who is going to be hired yet, but all signs point to when you get brought back for a second interview, this would be a great hire. When we see that Ben Johnson's heavily tied to the Raiders as well, that would be a great hire. I think things are moving in the right direction for the Raiders. And whether you're happy or not about the Antonio Pierce, Tom Telesco decisions, it looks like who they're going to be replaced with looks like some very, very good options.
Yeah, one of the things when it comes to hiring a GM that I personally believe, everyone's always focused on probably taking a GM from a winner, right? Everyone's looking at, oh, what are the Chiefs, right? What are their executives? Should we hire someone from there to be a GM? And that's not a terrible strategy. But I think it's better to look at assistants that you want to hire to be your GM who have worked under quality GMs and have learned from them, right? Because general manager, it's one of those weird positions where you can do a great job as a GM, but if your coach stinks or you're devastated by injuries, your performance on the team won't exactly be commiserate. Like, I think the Chiefs are one of the smartest teams in football. I think their GM Brad Veach is outstanding. But I think when you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid leading your team on the field on Sundays, you have a big advantage over a lot of other franchises. So while the Chiefs are a good source to potentially find GM candidates, I look for other teams that have quality quality leaders that get rosters that are outside of what you would expect. And I think the Ravens historically with Ozzie Newsome and then Eric DaCosta, of course, Joe Ortiz then went from Acosta like the Chargers, like you said, I think is the perfect example of this, right? This is a franchise in the Baltimore Ravens under Ozzie Newsome that was one of the best year in and year out for literally decades of drafting, of evaluating talent, finding quality free agents, not putting your franchise in a bad long-term position, making tough calls, making aggressive calls when appropriate. One of the great moves, I think, in NFL history was the Ravens after allocating a lot of dollars to Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco won him a Super Bowl. They decided years later to trade back into the first round to draft Lamar Jackson, a move some people very critical at the time. It turns out it was a perfect move. Ozzie Newsome, Eric DaCosta, Joe Ortiz, and now Alexander are all part of that lineage. I think it's a great strategy to hire a guy from that tree. Now, there's another guy who's also involved for a second interview as well. That's Brandon Brown from the New York Giants. Brown, of course, being tied to the Giants maybe raises some eyebrows because the Giants, frankly, have not been very good. But the reality is Brandon Brown learned his executive style under Howie Roseman, the Philadelphia Eagles' excellent general manager. So it's clear the Raiders have a perfect strategy. They're looking for talented executives to take over the GM role that have worked under other phenomenal GMs, right? They're trying to pull from really smart guys. And I think that's the right strategy. If you look for head coaching candidates, usually, at least for the last 5-6 years or so, people look for coaches under the Kyle Shanahan tree because he's obviously a phenomenal offensive mind. If you're looking for GM candidates, pick a couple guys that have worked under phenomenal GM minds. Ozzie Newsome, I think arguably the best general manager of all time with what he did for the Ravens. Bringing Alexander in, having him as the favorite, I think is an indication that the Raiders are using, again, a great strategy. And even their backup plan, Brandon Brown, worked under Howie Roseman, another phenomenal executive. So I think Alexander is the favorite. I think Brown is the second. But either way they go, the Raiders are making a really smart decision here. The process is outstanding. Again, I don't know if it's Brady, I don't know if it's Mark Davis, I don't know if it's a combination of factors, but the Raiders very quietly are turning around how they're running their franchise. They're using a lot more smart moves. They're being a lot less emotional, a lot more analytical, and it should result in a lot of success.